Hey folks, so today we're going to be talking about strength standards, and I wanted to bring this up because I've had a bit of a change of heart. I guess, yeah, I've had a change of heart. A couple of years ago when I first got onto YouTube, I remember doing a series of videos defending strength standards. This idea of trying to hit a 3-plate bench, 3-plate squat, 5-plate deadlift, but my views have matured over time. I am happy to say I have evolved, and it's okay, then it's fine. So I want to explain to you today a bit about my renewed focus on strength standards. And it's not like I had this big epiphany one day. It's just the way that my coaching has been going over the last few years. This is just what seems to be the best option for most people. So this was sparked on by a conversation I had in my comments by a guy called Robert. He said, could you give us some strength standards for different age groups, different body weights, some nuanced strength standards? And I wrote back to him. I said, look, dude, actually, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather you just pick a handful of exercises which you like to do, which suit your body, and then pick some targets for 6 months down the line and just get better at doing those. I thought that is a much more reasonable strategy rather than having to focus on the squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and weighted chin or barbell row. Because you can pick exercises which you're suited to. And I said, actually, I would rather you do that. Do that and just push up your strength over the course of the next 6 months. Push up your body weight and get jacked. Fantastic. Okay, so what I want to do today is I want to just outline some of the reasons why I originally called for strength standards. Because obviously at one time I believed in it, and I believed in it for a reason. I wasn't just, making stuff up. Like, there is a story behind why I believed in it. So I want to explain that, and you can see where I'm coming from. And I also want to explain the cons and why I have a different outlook now. So some of the pros. Let me take you back to the early days. Early days of the internet. It's going to be a good story when I go back 25 years, right? But anyway, this is all part of maturing, okay? You realize you can't stand still. Life moves on. Knowledge has progressed. The world changes, and you have to change with it. So back in the day, anyway, there was a large emphasis on the powerlifts as, I guess, targets for not only powerlifters, but also for bodybuilders. And a lot of the information in the early days of the internet was mostly powerlifting based. I have talked about this before. I think it's because powerlifting is easier to communicate in numbers and written text. It was only really when YouTube came around and YouTube gained some steam, 2010, after that we really saw people actually discussing bodybuilding for what it is. Because it's harder to write bodybuilding down. How do you really talk about the stretch, the squeeze, the mind-muscle connection without sounding like a quack? A lot of it is quite abstract. Whereas powerlifting is just hard numbers, routines. How do you communicate, feel? Powerlifting is a lot more regimented, at least in my experience. There are some exceptions. Obviously, we have RPE and stuff. We have ways of auto-regulating, but in general, we're dealing with numbers because we're trying to increase those numbers, right? So anyway, back in the early days, one of the benefits of having a squat, bench, deadlift focused routine was that it kept people focused. And practically speaking, right, in defense of my previous views, a lot of the guys who started off with me, who went down the powerlifting route, we often made faster progress than the guys who started off bodybuilding. Again, bear in mind, the level of information out there is completely different to what we have now. A lot of you guys growing up now are in the golden age of bodybuilding information compared to what we were 25 years ago. It was a mess back then. Like, people were saying all kinds of stupid stuff back then. It was great. People would seriously, with a straight face, tell you to squat to grow your chest. With a straight face. People were literally saying, just squat and deadlift, you're going to get as big as you're going to get doing that. I'm telling you, sonny. The old Clint Eastwood, get off my lawn kind of vibe. People love that kind of bullshit. Back in my day, all that kind of stuff, right? People loved it. So people used to say all kinds of dumb, stupid stuff back in the day. So that was the level of information we had back then. And through that, the small snippets that actually worked was, okay, progressive overload, get stronger. And if you're trying to deliver a message on text in a pretty quick sort of article format without a lot of nuance, that was enough to at least get people focused on getting stronger. Okay. Some of the positives of having squat, bench, and deadlift, overhead press, chin up focus were that those people, in my experience, with the information back then, those guys typically made better progress than the bodybuilders who just didn't have as much information on at the time. They were just doing the pump, the squeeze, the tone. Remember, Dorian hadn't really fully, told everyone what he was doing. So really, you were relying on the information from your Flex Wheelers, your Chris Cormiers, all that stuff, which was just go in the gym and doss around for a while until you get tired and then leave, go to the beach. So there wasn't a great deal of actual decent bodybuilding information back then. So the bodybuilders who focused on the squat, bench, and deadlift were making more progress solely because of the fact they were progressive overload focused. Do you guys understand that? Do you guys understand that it wasn't about the squat, bench, and deadlift? It was about getting people focused on getting stronger. That's why we promoted strength standards. That's what it was about. The next sort of point about this, it also gave you a universal strength standard to compare yourself against other people, okay, which is important because you can have different gyms with different equipment, so you don't really know how you stack up. Whereas the squat, the bench, and the deadlift done to at least reasonable form means that you can compare yourself to your buddy who's in the next city across, or some other guy on the internet who's in America or Canada, whatever it is. You can at least compare where you stand. It's a universal strength marker. You know if you're average or above average. And if you're below average and considerably below, it means that, well, you can pull your socks up and get going. It puts that drive into you to get stronger, to apply that progressive overload. And finally, I think another pro of the squat, bench, and deadlift, which is probably even true now to a certain extent, is that even if you change gyms, the barbell lifts are universal. A squat in one gym is the same as a squat in the next gym, apart from maybe some small minor differences so that you can keep your progression going. Whereas if my main method of chest pressing was a hammer strength chest press, and this actually happened to me in 2019, my gym closes, I have to go to a completely new gym, I have to apply new strength standards. And that's what happened to me in 2019 after my bodybuilding show. About 3 months afterwards, the gym closed down and I was at a completely new gym. I had to relearn all the equipment. I had to set new goals for all the equipment because it was completely different. Whereas squat, bench, and deadlift, it's always going to be a squat, bench, and deadlift. You get what I'm saying? So this first part of the video was justification for why I pushed strength standards in the past, even as recently as a couple of years ago. But now I want to talk a bit more about why I've changed my mind and why actually it's a better idea not to. Essentially, one of the downfalls of strength standards in the squat, bench, and deadlift is that it places a hell of a lot of importance on the barbell lifts. And that's a problem. Because if you have the squat, bench, and deadlift as your lifts, which you need to improve because those are your markers of progression, you might not be very suited to the squat. In fact, every time you get a good run at the squat, you might hurt your knee. And you're thinking, God, man, I hurt my knee. My leg press is going great. My hack squat's going great. But you know what? I keep hurting my knees on the squat. So that puts you out for a few weeks. And in that time, you can't hack squat. You can't leg press, even though those are going well. So then you come back. You think, okay, I've got to do the squat because that's how I know I'm progressing. So you get back on the squat. You want that full plate squat. You get injured again. You see where I'm coming from. If you're not suited to the lift and you keep getting hurt, it's not going to be good for long-term progression because it does two things. One, you get hurt. But two, you never really fully take advantage of the exercise you are good at. So let's say you're very good at leg presses. Let's say you're very good at hack squats. You know what? Since we're bodybuilding, let's say you're just very good at leg extensions. It's a good exercise. One of my bodybuilding friends, Sid, he did a whole off season with leg extensions as his primary exercise, and he's got great legs. So it will keep you away from exercises which you potentially are very good at or could be very good at, and it focuses you on some exercises which may hurt you and harm you, and it's not necessary to do that. I know how painful powerlifting can be because you have to fit into a box. And if you're a round peg trying to fit into the square box of powerlifting, you're going to get hurt. It's why there's not a lot of longevity in powerlifting. So I think some of the other cons are people are then tempted to take sort of side ventures into powerlifting. I think this was a recommendation from one of the evidence-based bros. This is something that Izzy Narvez said in a recent Instagram rant. So I did a rant on Instagram stories about evidence-based pros and how I'm kind of sick of them getting stuff wrong. And Izzy did his own rant, which was inspired by mine. And one of the examples he gave was of, I think it was Eric Helms' recommendation. Izzy can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think it was Eric Helms' recommendation that people should try maybe to do a powerlifting meet in the off season of bodybuilding. So I mean, if you really think about it, it is the dumbest idea. I'm not calling out Eric or anything. I like Eric, but honestly, it's the stupidest thing ever. Yeah, okay, you've just finished a bodybuilding show. Now get geared up for a powerlifting competition. It's the dumbest idea. It's like saying I'm going to compete in a 100-meter sprint, but I'm going to run a marathon in my off season. Everybody's entitled to change their mind, to change their opinion. That's what I'm doing right now. So no shade on Eric, but it's just a funny recommendation. But anyway, those are some of the cons of arbitrary strength standards. I want to just end with one con that I'm not a fan of, which is people always bring up the bodyweight argument. People love bringing up the bodyweight argument because they say, Faz, I'm 150 pounds. I can't possibly do a 3-plate bench. What can I do? My answer is always the same. Surely the goal is bodybuilding, that is to build your physique. So you don't want to stay at 150. Presumably you want to get bigger. You want to lift more weight.
You can always
get bigger, lift more weight. So that's not really a good argument. The irony is taller guys will say the same thing. I'm like 6'4", and it takes me a long time to get down in the squat. Come on, bro. Both of you, you're short guys and you tall guys, you're just underweight. Build some muscle. That's what we're trying to do here. Don't use your height as an excuse. So that is one con that I will not pass. So anybody says that in the comments, you don't get a pass. It's a lack of muscle. That's your real problem, not your height. Anyway, I wanted to put this out there because, yeah, I think, you know what? I think any coach isn't willing to say that they've changed their mind. I think there are coaches out there who take the stance that they are not only always right, but they're always going to be right. I think they think that puts them in a position of power, when actually it puts them in a position of weakness, because what you've effectively said, when you say, I know everything, what you've said is, I've tapped out. I am at the peak of my knowledge. I'm done. And what that means is you won't get any better. And what that also means is your audience won't get any better. They won't learn anything else from you because you've peaked. So I don't want to be one of those coaches. So I wanted to put this out there because I think it's a good message. If you do want strength standards, pick a handful of exercises which suit your body, and then pick some reasonable targets 6 months down the line, and just fight like hell to get those numbers. Right, folks. Peace out. Hope you found that useful. I'll speak to you in the next one.